Hello and welcome to week 5 in Rhetoric 3326. This is Dr. Harris and I want to do a few things with the week 5 video. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about punctuation and grammar. You should see some new things popping up on your proposal feedback, and I wanted to talk to you about what those are for. Second of all, I'm going to show you a little tip about the videos that I don't know that you know you can do. That should help you if you ever need to go back and rewatch pieces. I'm going to go over the week 5 assignments, talk about the 5.1 paraphrase, quotation, and summarize assignment, and then finally I'm going to go over some tips about revising the proposals for those of you who are going to be revising, but also for all of you, just kind of some general things to look for to double check and make sure that you're doing good work as we move toward that final report. So first of all, you might have seen in your feedback for your proposal some highlighted passages, and those are going to correspond to the textbook in two different ways. First of all, some of them will correspond with the 2.2 Common Writing Mistakes activity. So in other words, I'm highlighting passages that harken back to Chapter 7 that talks about those common writing issues. So if you see a highlighted passage with no commentary, what that means is you'll need to go back into that Chapter 7 of the textbook and look and see what rules you should be reviewing. In particular, a lot of the page 110 rules about clarity and wordiness seem to pop up a lot. But if you do see a highlighted passage and you're not sure what that is, that might be what it's referring to. The other thing that I'm going to start noting that's in your textbook, but I'm not counting off for yet, I will on the final report, but I haven't at this point, is punctuation. And you should see in some of your research proposals highlighted passages that have a comment off to the side that say see page 470 or see page 471. Basically in Appendix B you have a handbook, a brief handbook that helps you understand common errors, and you can go back and look through those errors and kind of review. Usually they're repetitive. In other words, you have patterns of error instead of a lot of different comma errors. So I'm going to just start pointing those out, not counting off for them, but bringing your attention to them because they will be graded for the final report. I want to show you one thing about the videos I'm not sure that you're aware of. We're on our course homepage right now. The videos are actually transcripted and captioned. So if you go to this little button here that says watch on YouTube and actually open the video up in YouTube, you have a couple of options for how you can scan previous videos. So if you need to go back and see a particular part of a video again, if you're not sure about some requirements for the assignment, you can actually go to the video on YouTube and you should see a little transcript button at some point. It might not look exactly like this because I'm on my video manager page, but you should see a button that looks something like this somewhere on your view. If you click on that, it will open up a transcript of the video. So not only can you see the text, the language that I'm talking about, you can actually scroll down and say, I need to review the purpose of technical professional writing. I don't understand quite what's going on. You can actually click on the section you want to watch, and the video takes you directly to that section. So you don't necessarily have to watch through the whole video again. You can actually just use the transcript to review pieces of that video, or actually just see the words that I'm using in the text. There's also a closed caption button for those of you who might have bad audio on your computer. You can turn that on or off. If you turn it on to English, you can play the video. So as professional writers, we often write proposals to give people. And that transcript that you see down below will actually appear here as well as be highlighted as you play it here. So I just wanted to show you those things that you can do with the video if you ever do need to go back and review the videos for the class if you're having trouble with an assignment. So next I want to talk about what we're going to be doing in week 5. There's actually two assignments. One is not necessarily on the schedule, it's kind of implied by the progression of what we're doing, and the other one is directly on the schedule. So if you scroll down to week 5, The 5.1 paraphrase, summarize, and quote activity is going to be due in Google Docs the same way we've been submitting documents by Sunday, February 16th at 11:59 p.m. And I'd ask you to first read in our textbook, Section A, and that's pages 426 through 432, which reviews how to complete summaries, paraphrases, and quotations. I'm also going to be making a video that goes over some information regarding that, and I'll link that into your welcome announcement, and I'll also link it in here so you can review that. If you're not clear on what plagiarism is, I've also linked in a handy source from plagiarism.org that's kind of fun. That walks you through what plagiarism is, how to use sources so as not to plagiarize. If you're not quite familiar or you're worried about doing that, you can review that source as well. I'm going to click on the 5.1 paraphrase, summarize, and quote link, which will take us to the assignment. An alternate way to get to the assignment is through the Assignments tab up at the top, Discussion Boards and Activities, and down here at the bottom, 5.1. That's your assignment. So let's review what you'll be doing. Incorporating your research is going to be one of the key components for your formal report. In week 6, we're going to do the progress report. In week 7, you'll be working on drafting the body of the report. And so this week's 5.1 activity is really preparing us for week 6 and 7. And how we're going to do that is by practicing summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting from 5 sources that you've located in your research. And this kind of talks about the other part of what you'll be doing this week. You might not have found all this research that you need to locate. In other words, you still might be looking for additional sources that aren't necessarily in library databases or in Google Scholar. You might be going on to regular Google to fill in some of the gaps, to look for some government documents that didn't pop up in previous reports. So what I'd like you to do is choose 5 sources, either from the week 3 and week 4 sources, or if those wind up not working for you, from your new sources. And for each one of those sources, provide that annotation or the citation at the top so I know which source you're summarizing. And then you'll summarize the key points from the source. So in a sentence or two, just kind of give the broad statement or summary. You'll paraphrase one of the main points of the source in your own words. So let's say you find one of the main points is really relevant to establishing the problem that you're researching. Take that passage and paraphrase it, and I'll show you in the video that I'll create here in a few minutes what paraphrasing looks like. And then to practice quoting, just directly quote one line from the source you believe is important to your report. Now, you might not wind up using all of these summaries, paraphrases, and quotes in the draft of your body for your project, but this will prepare you by helping you to start synthesizing your report, your sources, to see what passages you might use directly in that final report. You'll want to review the strategy sections for summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting sources, and those are in the reading, the 427 through 434 in the textbook. And then review the Think About It section, which again gives you specifics about what I'll be looking for, about how to successfully complete the project for 5.1. So what I want to move on to now is actually a little video clip if you have already done your proposal and had it accepted and have a final grade in Blackboard. It's a good idea to watch this next section. You might skim it. There are some points about research that I'm going to bring up that will be helpful to you, but primarily what the next part of the video is geared toward are those who have been asked to revise their proposal. First of all, I'm going to link into the welcome or to the announcement for this week an example of a student who did a really great job with his research proposal, and that's Justin Fee. So what Justin did particularly well is first formatting. It's clean, it looks professional, it follows the guidelines on page 345, but content-wise he did a really great job of clearly and succinctly identifying what he proposes to study, why this is a problem or an issue for this particular school district, who his specific intended audience is, a really clear scope of 3 steps that he's going to explore, And then data sources that I can clearly see link into that scope of proposed study. So Justin has given me permission to use this as an example. I'll be linking it in so you can look and see what a really sound research proposal example looks like. Good job, Justin, and thank you for letting me use that. So just to provide a general overview, I'm going to talk to you about revising the proposal, but these tips are also good for those who've already completed the proposal, just to think about how that proposal is going to help you structure your research for the formal report. First of all, this is a recommendation report. The example in the textbook shows you a recommendation report, and this differs in significant ways from an informative report. And this is just the description of the project that I wanted to go over again. Focusing on a local problem or issue, local being important. You might take something broader, such as obesity or eating habits, but what you'll need to do is narrow it down to a specific context. So is there a problem with school lunches in your particular school district that you want to address that can be solved? The important part here is that the result of your research should be a solution. You should be able to choose a problem that you can solve. And the report's going to spend the bulk of its time identifying that the problem exists and convincing your audience of the problem, your research for potential solutions for that problem, and then the proposal for the solution that you believe best addresses the key issues of that problem. So what I'm going to talk about next are some things that I saw in the proposals that some of us are still struggling with. And the first one is selecting an audience. Several of you wrote that I was going to be your primary audience. Unless you're writing in particular about online research, online studies, or technical writing, I probably cannot implement your recommendation. So what you'll want to do in your revision is to select a specific audience who can implement the change or solution that you will recommend. So whoever you identify should be able to take the conclusion of your research and make specific concrete changes to address the problem. If you can't identify a specific audience, in other words, if you can't think of anyone who could read this report and implement it, your problem might be too broad. It might be that you're trying to make too large a change. You can't necessarily change things at the state level, the national level, for all people who have a particular issue, but you can recommend changes or solutions for a really small, specific problem addressed by a specific group of people. The other thing might happen if you can't identify a specific audience is your problem might not be a problem that can be solved. And I'm going to talk about the heart attack report in the assignment description. If this is a problem that multiple people have been researching for multiple years, like childhood obesity, and major researchers at major research universities can't find a really strong solution, chances are you're not going to be able to recommend one in the 4 body pages that we have for this report. So you might need to select a problem that can actually have a solution that can be implemented. Another element that I saw some people kind of struggling with was finding reliable information. And when I talk about reliable information, that means that your sources should have 2 primary qualities. First is that they should be reliable for your identified audience. I noted that some people would say, I think that this is a reliable source, or it feels reliable to me, but you are not the primary audience. What you're going to have to do is convince your identified audience, that person or persons who can make the change, that the research you've done is reliable. And the other quality it should have is that it should connect directly to the steps that you indicate in that scope section of your proposal. So if you have 3 steps that you're going to complete in the research for this project, I should easily see in your annotations how those sources connect to those steps that you need to complete. And I want to talk about what reliable sources mean. Reliable sources are not general information. So some of you said that you were using a source because it provided a definition of something. You should be writing to an audience that already knows the definition. Newspaper articles, dictionary or textbook entries, or .com websites are general information that your audience is probably not going to find reliable. Whatever you find should be created or peer-reviewed by credible authorities and include specific research or data. You can use these elements, newspaper articles or dictionaries, as a starting point to gather background information for your own knowledge, or maybe use one newspaper article that's really pointedly addressing an issue that you're discussing, but it shouldn't be the bulk of the research that you're doing. And I'm going to show you an example search. I'm working on these online reports. I have a couple of journal articles that are coming out, and I have that report that I'm working on for my supervisor. And so I'm going to show you what I mean by the difference between a general source and a specific source. So I want to search for growth in online education, which I have done here in Google. And at this point in your research, feel free to use Google to supplement those peer-reviewed articles that you've already found. When I put that growth in online education into Google, I'm going to see, first of all, this block at the top that is irrelevant. I do not ever want to click on articles in this colored box because these are ads. And these are advertising and trying to convince me to buy something, so those are not ever relevant in my search. I just skip that. So the first few sources are actually reliable sources from the Sloan Consortium, which is an organization dedicated to researching online issues. I'm familiar with that organization. Those are excellent sources to use for my project. What I want to show you now are the next few sources. So after those, I see that there's an article in the Huffington Post, which is a very left-leaning resource, and it's not a specific source that would be something publishing about people who are really knowledgeable in this area. So I might use this for some background for myself, but I'm not going to use it in my actual survey report or my report. What I might do in these news articles is sometimes you'll see other sources linked in. So the Babson Survey Research Group released a report, and so I'm going to click on that and go look at that instead of that news article. So this is probably going to be a more reliable source because it's the actual research study that news article is drawing from. So if you can find a news article that links to a study, use the study instead of the news article. And I'm going to show you one more thing. The difference here in between, let's see, we had that Huffington Post article. U.S. News, that's a very general newspaper source. Again, they're going to link back to that study I can use, but I don't want to necessarily use that newspaper article. However, InsideHigherEd.com, if I click on that link, that specifically covers higher education news, so that's kind of a different beast. The New York Times is kind of a general newspaper, but Inside Higher Ed is actually a reliable news source in our field. So I might be able to use this news article as a reliable source, even though the New York Times is probably going to be a little bit too broad. And I can also see related articles over here, also covered by Inside Higher Ed, that might be reliable for my search. So to summarize, be very careful as you're going through your Google search to pick out things that aren't .com sites, newspaper reports, or really general information websites. Those are not necessarily going to be reliable for this research that you're doing. Then some of you will see comments that talk about connecting your sources to your scope of proposed study. In your annotations in that data sources section, you should include information that identifies which of the steps in your scope that source helps you complete. If you can't connect the source to a step in your scope of proposed study, the source might not actually be one that you need to use. And I saw this happening in some people's annotations. They would say the source would be good to help them do something in particular, but when I looked back to their scope of proposed study, I didn't see that that was something they indicated they needed to actually do. So the source might be one now at this point as you're going through your sources that you can kick out or replace with something more specific. Finally, I want to mention that we are not writing to inform, and I know that it feels like I've repeated this point over and over, but you are not writing a document that talks about the state of something, that talks about available resources, that just kind of lists things that are available. You should identify an audience that doesn't need an extensive background or history of the issue or a definition of the major concepts in the issue. If this person has the power and ability to make a change, they will already understand the issue pretty thoroughly. So instead, what you're going to do is researching background information so that you are informed about the topic, and then the bulk of the report you're going to use those sources, not that address the key facts of the problem necessarily, but can persuade that the problem should be addressed and that your solution is best. And in week 7, when we draft the body of the report, we'll talk more about how you can do that, in particular in paragraph form. Review the format on page 345. That's one of the things that Justin Fee does really well in that example. The textbook provides these models because I want you to see exactly how strong proposals are formatted, and your formatting should look exactly like the model in the book, or as much as you can. So follow the guidelines for bolding, spacing, and setting up a memo heading. It should look clean and fairly like those examples in the textbook. The formal report will also have an example of formatting. So that is kind of an overview of tips that can help you if you need to revise your proposal. If you have any questions about the week 5 activity or about the proposal itself, feel free to email me at haharris@ualr.edu. For those of you who are revising that final or the proposal, you'll be wanting to submit that by 11:59 p.m. February 14th. Send me an email or some kind of indication that you have revised the proposal so I can know to go back in and look at that when you've finished revising. Have a great week. I look forward to reading the revised proposals, and for those of you who are going on to work on completing your research, best wishes, and let me know if you need any help with the specific stages of that process. Have a good week.